The 4 2v8 Survivor classes that I was so obsessed with are practically the same as they were back in late 2024. As a result, my second 2v8 video is still relevant, and I stand by everything I said. So I've repurposed it here because no one watched it anyway. I have some general tips to consider. Try running to light zones to lose the killers. Killers don't like chasing in areas where generators are already on. They can't simultaneously pressure unactive gens, which will be in the back of their mind. I use this tactic in vanilla as well, and it serves me fine. Even if they do chase and down you, you've given your team some breathing space on the remaining gens. And just do any gen. Don't strategize about going for central generators. Corner ones are fine, and you work towards making light zones. And these zones are better at not making you feel guilty if you waste pallets and the like. I'd also recommend avoiding the middle exit gate. It's more likely to be patrolled by the killers. Try to open one of the gates at the side, and if a killer shows up, run to the fourth wall that has no exit gate. They either won't chase you or will give someone else enough time to open the gate. Like with light zones, they don't want to waste time. Now let's look at the classes. The 4 classes have 4 pseudo perks and a little extra. Like in the second iteration of 2v8, all survivors essentially have Unbreakable as base kit, meaning they can recover from the dying state. Upon using this Unbreakable variant, it drains your charge skill, so I think survivors can use it as many times as they want, as opposed to it only being available on Death Hook in the first 2v8, or only once as with Bill Overbeck. As in the second iteration of 2v8, I don't have a favourite class. All 4 are great, and given they're so similar to last time, I hope this video will still be relevant when the 4th 2v8 iteration comes around. But how do the 4 differentiate? Let's meet the team. The Escapist. Pseudo perks available are Infectious Super Sprint Burst, Triggered Reimagined Quick and Quiet, Nerfed Windows of Opportunity, and Emergency Self-Care. The Escapist is a good choice against any killer really, thanks to its mobility and good escape powers. Being hard to catch is useful for your team as you waste the killer's time. Even the ranged killers find hitting a speeding target harder. Sprint Burst is usually an A-tier perk and sits as an average exhaustion perk behind Lithe and Dead Hard and ahead of Balanced Landing and all the other crap. I suppose Trapper is the biggest cause of concern for you as you bolt into the prime jaws of another snap attack, but he's still a weak choice. Just avoid the main structure and hope for the best. Like always, you can 99 your Sprint Burst to save it for when you really need it, but given the exhaustion penalty is only 20 seconds and there's no Mindbreaker or Blood Echo or anything like that, you probably won't need to rely on this strategy. Infectious Sprint Burst gives you and everyone around you a haste effect for 3 seconds that stacks with other instances of this occurring, and it only costs a 20-second exhaustion penalty. I still love the feeling of us sprinting to the next gen or bolting away from an approaching killer like a group of whiny rabbits. And once again, this speed haste can be gifted to teammates mid-chase to help them get out of a jam. I just love it. The Escapist can still bully wraiths. They uncloak, then you and everyone around you is now halfway across the board. They'll try to bait the Sprint Burst out of you before running you down, so I suggest playing chicken as they fake the uncloak. But I also stand by my view that the Wraith is the best killer in 2v8, and once the novelty of the latest trio die down, he'll be back in Fearmonger form. Watch your back. The Quick and Quiet variant charges over 30 seconds to give you and everyone nearby silenced rushed actions for a short time. It's not automatic like Meg Thomas's version, but is an activatable Quick and Quiet on command. I honestly don't use it very much for myself, much less for others. It's tricky to get value out of it on behalf of others, but it's nice to have the option in your back pocket to make some silly plays. The Windows of Opportunity variant reveals pallets and vaults at a 16 meter range rather than a 32 meter range, as in Kate Denson's version, but as of the early 2025 meta, WOO is still a respected perk. it has the same massive utility it always does despite the shorter range. As before, you can use it to queue loops ahead of time, exploiting the increased pallet spawn rate, making yourself a headache to catch. Also, the shorter range does prevent the board being obscured, which is something. But best of all, with the scouts in the background fixing up the pallets you waste, you'll have more to use, and you'll be able to see the auras of the rebuilt pallets to keep any chase going on and on. But windows of opportunity is also about what you don't see. It broadcasts lack of opportunity. If you see nothing, you're in a dead zone and need to run somewhere else. It's just a very versatile perk that many players, including myself, rate highly. Despite, yes, it is a brain rot training wheels noob crutch. Sue me. The Escapists version of self-care, although healing at 70% rather than 35%, really isn't very good, and this unlockable skill should be swapped with the Medic's unlockable skill for consistency's sake, more than anything. You heal yourself at a 70% rate, so technically 30% slower than a teammate would, and Medics can heal others 50% faster than that, and if they see you using self-care, they will judge you. But I suppose it's possible there are no medics within 128 meters of their empathy scan. But even a non-medic is better than doing it yourself. You have 7 teammates after all. Why would you need this perk? I suppose you could just heal yourself in the medic's face to assert dominance and remind them you don't need a nanny, but don't be surprised if they bear a grudge after that. I wouldn't change the Escapist if I could, and not just because of power creep. But if the developers wanted to attract more survivors, the old revival made for this was a hell of a draw, even if it was a bit much. The class doesn't feel as badass as it did in the first version of 2v8, but we got used to it. I still don't like the name though. All of them are trying to escape, so... oh, forget it. The Guide. Pseudo perks available are Reimagined Technician come Better Together, Back Pocket Prove Thyself, Boosted Visionary come Deja Vu, and Collective Hyper Specialist... thing. I never know what to call that one. The Guide's Better Together variant, where they reveal the generator they're working on to nearby teammates, was never very useful. You have 7 teammates that can hear you on the gen anyway. Nevertheless, it might help your dozy teammates get cracking on the final gen, so I'd never say it was useless, even if you still don't get the aura reveal on a down as you would with Nancy's vanilla version. I do, however, question the usefulness of quieter gen repairs via Reimagined Technician, given you'll probably have at least one other survivor near you, thus giving the killer something else to see, and thus negate any value you might get from hush fixing. But, again, you never know. It's something, and it might yield value in RCP. The great skill check bonus progression of plus 3% is still in play, and it has a lot of extras attached to it. One of them is the Back Pocket Prove Thyself charge skill. There really isn't much to it, just press the button every 90 seconds to give everyone nearby an 8% generator repair speed increase over 10 seconds. I'm not 100% clear exactly how many seconds are saved, but it's nothing to sniff at being triggered maybe 3 times with just one guide. It's gen rushing overdrive. I was worried about this, and I still think this is an issue. I suppose missing skill checks is also still an issue like it was before, but even with potato skippers I think you'll still be saving more time than wasting it, so long as you do your assigned job. You chose to be a gen jockey, so make it work. Boosted Visionary reveals unfinished generator auras at a 32 meter range. It's not terribly powerful, but it is useful, I suppose. As a bonus, you can also see the auras of the 4 generators closest to each other at infinite range to prevent any 4-genning scenarios, similar to Deja Vu. It's a fine inclusion, but like so many other things, feels redundant. Killer duos aren't going to try and 4-gen, there simply isn't enough time and it's just not effective or practical. Collective Hyper Specialist Thing is a rusher's delight, the bane of every sober killer, making fast gens even faster. There isn't a base perk quite like it. After being caged/hooked once, You'll henceforth gain a boost upon generation completion for every survivor nearby, and that boost is applied to the next generator you repair. Let's just be thankful it only activates after enduring one cage state. Maybe it should be 2. Ultimately, the guide epitomizes the boring but practical playstyle. Trappers will be punished given they'll set up their traps just as the last gen activates, but the typical killers with good map pressure will be the problem, and they will hunt you down by making note of who's who in the lobby to try and slow the rush. I would. It's fitting that 2 of the killers added in the second iteration of 2v8 are especially nasty for guides. Blight and Spirit are high-tier hunters notorious for bringing the pressure, and with time being as tight as it is, they won't hold back. To a lesser extent, Hillbilly and Nurse will be issues as well, but between cooldowns, crashes and asthma attacks, their pressure isn't as oppressive as Talbot and Rin. But Junior and Sally are the more lethal classes at the killer's side's disposal, so even now I wouldn't underestimate them. I was worried about gen speeds and tiny changes having huge consequences. I even mentioned Prove Thyself by name in first time around because I knew there was a risk of making gen rushing just too much. I think the back pocket Prove Thyself should only charge every 180 seconds as opposed to 90 seconds. Maybe 120 seconds. And the unlockable free charger skill should also be diminished somewhat. As is, it's most definitely good to have guides on the team. The Medic. Pseudo perks available are Healing Leader meets Enforced Iron Will, Reimagined Autodidact but Ranged and Infectious, Rip-Off Empathy, and Reimagined Reversed Babysitter meets Reimagined Reversed Empathic Connection thing. The Medic's job is absolutely vital. I stand by this point and will die on this hill. You need at least 2 medics on your team or you're gonna have a bad time, doubly so with Legion zipping around. The medics get everyone fixed up and back into the grinder doing gens with a bare minimum of fuss, and when a doc isn't nearby, you feel the pain significantly more. The medic's personal heal speed is 50% faster than normal, and the Healing Leader gives all teammates within an 8 meter range 50% faster healing speed as well. It also still reveals the heal target's aura to nearby friendlies, promoting a fast reset, and it also suppresses nearby grunts of pain in what I can only imagine is the medic telling everyone to shut up. The team depends on this regroup reset. People like being healed swiftly, then getting back to the action. You might say this is also a boring but practical class, but at least you won't be holding M1 as long as the nerds that players guide. I will go so far in this belief to suggest this. To any killers who might be stalking me right now, listen up. I truly believe that if you notice there are no medics in the lobby, hit and run tactics just became viable. I felt this way in the previous versions of 2v8 and I still do. Non-medics find healing other survivors a chore and might put it off if they're not trying to overcompensate for the lack of doctors on the board. Either way, injured targets are more vulnerable. The guides won't be able to rush gens if they're being healed up, or are forced to play medic themselves and sluggishly heal their mates. I have a theory that this can slow down matches and give a good chance for bloody victory.
Back to it then.
But if there's at least 1 medic in the team, this strategy immediately falls apart. Between the faster heals medics perform and provoke others to perform, as well as the occasional insta-heal, all hit and run plays become completely nullified in the face of medics. That autodidact effect will shave off 50% healing for the medic and anyone around them, and can stack with other instances. I call it the autodidact effect because it's like healing with 5 stacks, except you start with those stacks and can do it at range. It really is an amazing bonus, making injuries much less punishing, but this time skill requires 120 seconds. Once again, I say empathy is a decent perk and should be utilised to keep everyone in fighting shape. It has further uses in that should you suddenly see an aura, you know where one of the killers is, and further hard counters the Legion. Even just getting close to the wounded ally will at least enforce some Iron Will unto them, helping them stay hidden should that eventuality come up. The Medic's unlockable skill teeters on the realm of redundancy, but there's a lot to it. Babysitter causes, amongst other things, an unhooked survivor to leave no scratch marks. Empathic connection allows other survivors to see your aura when they're injured. Again, it has other effects. This reimagined reverse babysitter meets reimagined reversed empathic connection pseudo-perk monstrosity will, upon receiving one cage state, prevent your scratch marks being revealed whenever you are in the wounded state, and will reveal your aura to other survivors when you are injured. It's yet another ace in the hole, and although certainly not useless, I'm just left thinking, is it really necessary? This would be a much better fit on the Escapist, and the Medic should have the self-care. Would that make too much sense? Medic is already modelled on Claudette Morel, and if the Medic can heal themselves, they can get to healing others with more confidence. The Scout. Pseudo-perks available are Hyper Object of Obsession Revival come Infectious Urban Evasion, Boosted and Reimagined Any Means Necessary, Boosted Alert, and Iron Will come Somewhat Fixated. The language to talk about these perks is still tricky, but simply put, the signature skill is when you see a killer within 64 meters, you reveal their aura to all survivors across the map. When thinking about the Scout, the question at the forefront of my mind is, how useful is this skill? And after the previous two 2v8s and many matches in this one, I still struggle to answer that question. Does your team, like you, constantly calling out one of the killer's locations? Is it more viable in the new era of Shadow and Fearmonger killer classes which grant undetectable and other bonuses when unseen? Or would your team rather you just fix a damn gen and stop wasting time with this gimmicky nonsense? Well, at least it's not boring but practical. For the most part, it's interesting and impractical. But I think guides in particular will appreciate having a read on the killers as much as possible. I suppose it all depends on who you ask. It's still useful for occasionally lullifying a mind game, given you might see the killer's aura through walls via another scout. This signature skill is also only really useful if the scout can easily stalk their intended target. Blight and Spirit will be hard to keep up with, thus putting you back on the gen. Similar applies to Hillbilly and Nurse, but an early warning of their approaches could be a big deal though. Huntress gives herself away with her obsessive humming, but again, an early call-out she's aiming can be a big help. Mastermind and Nemesis are both vulnerable to being called out like this, but the Legion will sense you via killer instinct and then hit you and run away. And then there's the Wraith, who just made the Scout skill next to useless. Given old Philip Ojomo will spend half the match cloaked, Scouts won't get to reveal him or even keep up with him or see where he's going. Scout is made useless by this killer, but contrast this to the Trapper. Stalking a Trapper and calling out when and where he places traps will completely nullify him. And then there's the Death Slinger. Despite being a lanky sort you'd notice in a pub, he does have a habit of sneaking up on you and is very quiet on his approach. Also, as a 110% move speed killer, keeping a tail on him will be easier. You can really ruin his day. But now comes the bad news. Caleb Quinn is still the weakest killer in this mode. Deathslinger is not suited to 2v8 without some serious pressure, so Scout having the edge against him isn't very helpful because you're probably gonna win anyway. And now I'm going to whine about Urban Evasion. I know when crouched you make less noise, but with Iron Will at your disposal after one hook that's not really relevant. Urban Evasion was only really useful against Executioner, Hag and Skull Merchant, and even then in mostly niche moments. None of them are even available in 2v8 and maybe thank God for that, so Urban Evasion still feels like a total waste. Maybe it's somewhat useful against Nurse, who can't be checking for every corner you might creep behind owing to the fact she's the slowest killer in the game and needs to get back to applying pressure. Maybe in some niche situational moments you might save yourself or someone else with infectious Urban Evasion, but otherwise this doesn't deserve this much attention. I do admit though, I like trailing the killers with my Urban Evasion. It makes me feel like the paparazzi. The Scout also has Yui Kimura's Any Means Necessary, but better. Every 60 seconds you can either reset a downed pallet or even repair a broken pallet from the ether, and like all recharging skills, it just recharges passively. Don't worry about saving this ability, just revive any pallets. They can all be useful and your ability will charge up again before you know it. I will say to prioritise fixing broken pallets as opposed to lifting dropped pallets to make the most of the recharge. Dropped pallets can still be used after all. Even now it all strikes me as crazy. It's a nice and novel idea and a good tool to have in the Scout's belt, but it's annoying you can only see restore auras when standing still. Maybe it's to stop you confusing it with windows of opportunity, but they could just make the aura reveal a different colour. Boosted Alert is exactly as it was, revealing killer auras upon a break action for 6 seconds. Killers have sort of nowhere to hide come Call of Brine as base kit, so this will net a lot of value. Nowhere to hide will reveal survivor auras if they're nearby, and I will say that when the scout sees their aura kicking, they'll have more of a chance to get out of nowhere to hide range and prevent this happening. Additionally, when you see the kick, you'll know where a regressing generator is that you can save if you're nearby. Generators regress faster in this mode owing to Call of Brine, and you might just save a lot of progress. Think of it as a budget rookie spirit. I still don't rate the vanilla alert, arguing that the information it gives you really isn't that useful, but it's better in 2v8. It's important to remember there's no surge or ruin or pain resonance here, so killers will kick a lot more than they would in vanilla matches. Of course, not much of this applies to the Wraith. Just fix up a few pallets for the escapists and let them take care of business. Finally, we have the last pseudo perk, and it's a bit of a flop. I'm glad we finally have Iron Will after one hook state, and we make Medic's enforced Iron Will completely redundant, but it's hardly a game changer. As for walking 25% faster, this might be the least necessary addition. Okay, it's actually faster than Nancy's Fixated, which only puts walk speed up to 20%, but it's only 5% less of not having a point than it otherwise would be. Maybe there are some niche instances where faster walking can be useful, but otherwise, just run. Would I change this class? Yes. I strongly feel their boosted any means necessary ability should only charge up when they reveal a killer's aura to their team, and not passively on its own. To counterbalance, maybe only 30 seconds of reveal is necessary to charge any means necessary, as opposed to 60. And additional charges are needed to revive pallets instead of just lifting them. Final thoughts? If you've watched this far, you deserve a medal for sure. I still stand by my idea for a 5th survivor class in the Artisan, as laid out in the first video on 2v8. I really like items, and I love stealing them, and I want them to play a bigger role, and I want to steal them. But maybe 2v8 should stay as it is. Too many changes contribute to this hazy feeling the game has. Maybe this one should just stay as it is. I hope they make it permanent soon.